chatting to Alex. I love answering questions too, and Alex loves answering questions too. So let's get the questions rolling, and I'll take 5 or 10 minutes to show some cool little side projects that I've been building around Tailscale. Um,
Absolutely. So
I
the
can't
general
see the
idea,
YouTube chat. It's all right. Go ahead.
yeah. Oh, I have a double. I can hear myself twice now. This is fun. So the general idea is that I can't deal with that. The general idea is that we've got the YouTube live chat going on one side, and we've got a Zoom chat going on the other. And Lee is going to monitor the Zoom side. I'll monitor the YouTube side. Once we've got that all figured out, then we should be good to go. So if you have any questions for us, pop them in the YouTube chat and we'll do our best to get them. We've also got another webinar coming up. When's the next date for the next webinar? I want to give that a little plug.
Hopefully our trusty backing team can get that. I don't have that to hand. Our trusty support team in the background. June the 4th, apparently. So yeah, we've got one of these coming up pretty soon, next month. So
Great.
okay, I'm gonna do a little bit of show and tell. I have three different projects that I've been working on. And this is live demo. I haven't practiced any of this. I'm just going to go off the cuff. So if it doesn't work, it's my terrible code that doesn't work. So let's go and start there. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see, everybody can see my screen. Can you see my screen? That's what everybody has to say, right? Okay, first thing. Um, we have been talking to lots of companies about connectivity around AI because one of our largest customer profiles is AI companies. If you go and look at all the logos on our website, and as the very interesting phenomenon of being able to connect AI things to your data so they can slurp up all that data and then regurgitate it back to you. One of the things that was interesting for some customers is the ability to be able to interface with their Tailscale Tailnet with a model context protocol server. So I put together a model context protocol server. You can see it here with Claude. So I'm able to actually retrieve information directly from my Tailnet and like have AI tell me a bunch of stuff that I can probably figure out myself. This is interesting to some people. It was an interesting exercise for me to be able to build something like this so that you can actually understand how the protocol works. I think there's a lot of exciting things in this space, but a lot of concerning things from a like personal privacy point of view, but that's just my personal opinion. But this allows me to be able to actually like ask questions of the tailnet. So you can see I built a couple of tools which will allow me to get specific device info and list all devices. And then we have this consideration of like what a model context protocol calls a server, and that will actually dump a whole bunch of information into the client, which is called desktop, and I can ask it questions, and it will pass this information and provide varying degrees of quality to the actual AI server. So, this is a little hobby experiment. If anybody's interested in taking this for a try or at least contributing to it, I'm very open to contributions here. But this I thought was something that is very popular in the space right now, and a lot of our customers are asking about it. So that's show and tell number one.
All right, let me ask you some questions because I
Yes,
I
please
have
do.
a couple. So it can hook into your tailnet, and I think you mentioned this, but it's using the Tailscale API to query this information.
Yes. So essentially, a model context protocol is something that you run that actually feeds information into the AI LLM, right? And so this particular one is running on my local machine, and I will show you how it's configured, but it's got an API key in there, so I'm not going to do that. And what it does is like makes an API call to the Tailscale API and then returns a whole bunch of JSON. So you can actually see the result of that here. And this is like the JSON that's come back.
Ah, very
Um,
good.
yeah, and so like the model context protocol is really new and is really early, and there's a lot of things here that are like you know like still in flux and still being built. So right now, a lot of people are running these locally on their devices. I personally am really excited about the possibility of being able to use Tailscale's like permission capabilities to be able to actually leverage, which part of your API or which part of your machine can it actually talk to. I can talk a little bit more about that in the next show and tell, but essentially that's what it's doing. It's just funneling information into like I mean, theoretically, you could just do a curl call and copy and paste this into the chat box, right? But like,
Yeah.
for non-technical users, these MCP servers are really helpful to be able to kind of funnel this information in, basically.
So what does the architecture for this setup kind of look like? I mean, could you open an Excalibur or something and draw us a quick like little picture as to like
It's
what's
really
what's
simple.
running
It's
where?
literally a binary that runs on the machine, and then the
Oh,
binary, and I can like let me go and bring it up here.
because I think for me that's been I haven't experimented with any MCPs at all yet, and it's definitely on my list because I think that's where things are going, you
So
know.
this is the actual code, and most people are writing MCPs in Python, but I can't stand the language, so I've written it in Go, and
Yeah.
it's literally just a binary that's running locally on my machine, and you pass in an API key, and then it returns a bunch of JSON. Now there are organizations that are running these on your behalf, so like you can run them in the cloud, and you call them over HTTP, and there's a whole bunch of other things, but this is literally just running locally for me, and then it calls out to the Tailscale API when you make a request, basically.
Well, that makes a ton of sense. So it's just a local binary on your system that's effectively acting as like a go-between between
Yeah,
the
yeah,
different things.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like the next version of it's like API 2.0 if you want to think of it a little bit like that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So that's like part one of my little experiments over the last few weeks. Part two is a little bit more of like a personal thing, and everyone's just seeing a little highlight into some of the functionality we're going to be building with our multi-tailnet stuff there as I switch between tailnets in a single window.
I was wondering
Um,
if you were going to comment on that because I was like,
I
oh,
was just
maybe you
gonna
shouldn't have shown that.
quietly, I was just gonna quietly not mention it, but everybody's
Yeah.
seeing it now, and it's recorded and live on YouTube. So then another thing that I personally have been like working on. So we have a Terraform provider. So let's just bring that up. Terraform provider. We have a Terraform provider which will allow you to manage ACLs, right? And I mentioned this a few weeks ago, and there's a resource here that allows you to build an ACL. This resource in Terraform expects you to send the actual ACL as a full file, right? And so you have to build it out, and it's a single file, and you can see here it's like a big string. What I've always wanted to be able to do is manage each parts of these ACL in a more granular way. And what I mean by that is I would like to be able to do resource ACL and then a single ACL, or resource group and then a single group that then gets concatenated into a big, into like a big string at the end of it. So
Yeah.
I built something to do that, and I call
Cool.
it Tackle, which is Tailscale ACL. I've been looking for a reason to register a new domain name, so here we are. And this will actually it creates an API that will allow you to actually like send requests to like an intermediary server, and then it will build all like your final ACL for you. So you can see here, like I can actually put an update in a single ACL entry or get a single ACL entry from a server. What I think is really interesting about this is that I've leveraged like Tailscale's application capabilities to be able to define which ACL endpoints that you're able to use. And I added a Terraform provider on top of it. So this has been being built for like the last few months. I now use this to manage most of my ACLs. It's definitely not production ready, and it's more a proof of concept. But what does that look like in reality? Well, let's show you what this looks like here. So you can see I can actually now declare a single ACL with an action, a source, and a protocol, or a single group with a name and members. And then I can actually think of these in a similar way as like AWS security groups or Azure security groups, and I can build an entire file over time. So what does that look like in reality? If I do Terraform apply, it's going to show me that it's going to add a single ACL and all that kind of stuff. I'll hit yes, it's added that. And so in the background, Tackle has received an API request. It's like grabbed a bunch of stuff and I've added it. And then eventually it builds that and then it will sync the ACL up to Tailscale as like a single action. So we have like an intermediary state here. So you can see here I've pushed a local ACL to Tailscale. If I go look at the audit logs, you should be able to see it just added this section. It didn't add anything else, right? Like I'm not managing it all as a single file. It's a much more granular way. And so what are the use cases for this? If you have multiple teams that want to manage a Tailscale ACL and you don't want people to be able to break certain parts of it, but other parts of it, this is a really great way of being able to do that. And you can see, I can actually see, look, it's added my single ACL, and then I can obviously do Terraform destroy. And similar situation, it will eventually, so you can see that's the delete that happened again on the intermediary server, and then it will run a sync and it will push it up there. So this is something that I like coming from an infrastructure as code background or coming from an infrastructure background. This is something I've always wanted to be able to do. And this has been kind of useful for me to be able to manage these things in a little bit more of a granular way. And you can see the delete operation there. Again, definitely not production ready. Definitely not something you should do in your production tailnet, but I am looking for people to try this out and like find bugs and help me figure out how this is going to work in the long term. So yeah, I'll
So where
pause
can
there.
we send people to find more information?
Get-tackle.com. And
Very
then
good.
there is a GitHub repo of Tackle. And I separate my GitHub repos for like this is a personal project that I'm not going to support into Jackstone, which is my like personal GitHub, and then the LBR labs, which I kind of like. I'm going to keep building and working on. Like this is kind of in the LBR labs thing here. So lots of documentation. I also got API docs out here as well. Like I've tried to build this as like from first principles, but I've really enjoyed building this and I've really enjoyed using it as well. So hopefully I can't see the chat. Hopefully, we'll see some people kind of give this a try and see what it looks like.
Yeah, I think you've been able to do what's called GitOps with your ACLs for a while, but as you say, it's not been particularly granular the way you can do that.
Mm,
I think
yeah,
what's interesting about this is particular the way Terraform structures its input files. You could literally have a grunts file, an ACLs file, an SSH file, and just
exactly.
keep things very distinct and very separated. So I think it's a great concept. I mean, I don't know about anybody
Yeah,
else, but I
I've
really
just really
like it.
enjoyed it as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed building it, and what I really like actually, I'm gonna see if I can go off book a little bit here. So you can see here actually it uses this creates a like Tailscale node, so you can see it here as tackle, and then we use the application grant stuff to be able to like determine which things you're able to actually manage. So like I've made this pretty broad, but for example, I could allow somebody to only do get get requests from from here, right? Which would mean that if I try to do a post request, like modify the ACL, I can't actually do that. And this is all built into Tailscale's application capabilities. So it actually, you can see that it's kind of linked to admin here and it's linked to certain destinations. The ability to be able to do that is like a very Tailscale thing. And I think I could do a whole webinar on Tailscale application capabilities, but this is really exciting. I didn't need to build any authentication. It's all kind of coming directly from the Tailscale capabilities, which I think is cool.
really
Okay.
cool.
The
Yeah.
last one is a little bit more simpler, but like I've been meaning to build this for like a long, long time, and I thought it was going to take too long. But I leveraged, so I like bootstrapped a CLI tool, which will allow me to interact with the Tailscale API via a CLI tool. And this has been something that I've been looking to build for a long time. But I'm slowly building it out, and so you can do things like get, list, set, and delete. So if I do TSCLI, I already did list devices, so let's get a node ID, and then I can do get device. I can't remember the format for it right now. Device is this, and then do all, and it will allow me to actually interact with the Tailscale API directly over a CLI. I'm building this out very slowly, and it will have. I expect it to have the full capabilities of the API to be able to interact via CLI tool, because there's lots of parts of the API that you kind of want to use on a regular basis that you need to use curl commands for. And I was like, I'm just going to build a CLI tool for this. So if you ever really wanted to be able to talk to your Tailscale API over a CLI tool, you can now do that. And that is at TS CLI. So I started this last night and leveraged some LLMs to speed it up. I've personally found that I can be way more productive with LLMs if I feed it what I like my example code, and then it kind of like fleshes the stuff of it around
Right.
for me. But this has been really helpful for me as well. I've been using this all last few days as well. So those are my three show and tells. A lot of ground to cover there, but hopefully some people will find this stuff useful.
Yeah, I mean, some of those could literally have been an entire episode by
I
themselves.
know. I just
Really,
jammed it into 15
really,
minutes. Yeah,
really cool stuff. Let's take some questions though, because I think
indeed. Let's do it.
that's why many people are here. All right. So I just want to point out that Numa in the chat said that your multi-tailnet quick, I don't know if it was a slip or a purposeful show,
Intentional.
intentional
Yeah.
show made his day. So there you go.
Glad to hear it.
All right. So first question I can see right here is, can I force Tailscale to require two-factor every time I connect to something? I'm using a business Microsoft account.
Yes. So a very common question that we get about Tailscale is like, can I bring my own identity, like username and password? And the answer that we have for that kind of philosophically is no, we don't want to store passwords. We want to have that be the responsibility of the provider that you have linked to your Tailscale account over our OIDC. So if you want to use MFA with your tailnet, it is the responsibility of the identity provider that you have attached to your tailnet to be able to enforce that. So there is no setting in Tailscale to enforce MFA. You enforce the MFA on Google or Okta or Microsoft or whatever your backing identity provider is. And then that will require you to use MFA there. But you can't do it directly on the Tailscale like settings, because we want to pass the responsibility off of like identifying who you are to things that are better at doing that rather than us having to build out an entire identity provider. We had like, I think we had 5 support questions last week saying, I want to use my own email and password. We have no plans to build that. It's just not going to happen because, we're a security company and we want to pass that security responsibility off to companies that are, building identity providers like Okta, and that is their core competency. So you can run your own OIDC provider. That is something that we support. And so I think Alex has done some videos on running your own OIDC
Very,
provider. Like,
very recently too. Yeah. Pocket
yeah,
ID is a good one. Authentic is another good one.
yeah, yeah. And again, if you want to use MFA with those, it's the responsibility of that OIDC provider to enforce MFA. And
And
so hopefully that answers the question.
don't forget, you can also, specifically talking about SSH here, you can set what's it called, check mode, which enforces every time you make a Tailscale SSH connection, which enforces you to have the user log in and re-authenticate every time in a browser session or some other way of doing like a two-factor. So the answer is yes, with a couple of caveat cherries on top, but nothing too significant. Yes, I think is a fair answer there. All right, so the next question comes in. Here's something I've never been able to quite figure out. How does Tailscale do cross-private subnet routing discovery? For instance, in a scenario where I'm on the same 1918 subnet as a peer, or when I'm on a different subnet, but where I know that I've got a layer 3 route to the peer, how does Tailscale discover this and avoid hairpinning via public egress?
I actually talked with one of our engineers about this today, and it all comes back to how we dictate the endpoints that we have for a client to be able to connect to you. So when you go into the Tailscale dashboard, or if you run Tailscale NetCheck, you'll see that inside every Tailscale device, there is an endpoint table. It's under the machine details. And you'll probably notice in that endpoints table, there's a whole long list of IP addresses, such as your public IP address. It also has your local IP address as well. So like your 192.168 that your router's handed to you, or whatever, whatever your router's handing out. And the way that the Tailscale connects to each device is it uses those endpoints to be able to actually connect them. So the short answer for how it figures out to use the right endpoint is it sends an actual request over to every single one of those endpoints in parallel. And then whichever one responds the fastest is the one that it uses for a connection. So obviously, if you send a request out through the public endpoint, like to the public endpoint, it will go out through your internet connection and then back in again. That's going to take a little bit longer than it is if you just send it to the 192.168 address that's kind of directly next to it. And so the way that it does that is actually relatively simple. Like send a request to all endpoints in one go, figure out which is the shortest path, and then use that as the connection. But we do occasionally see that sometimes that can actually create some problems. So like if you have, let's say you have two ISPs, sometimes you can actually find that if one of those ISPs is like flapping or flaky, that you will send a request to an endpoint that is like the lowest latency, but then the response never comes back because the internet went away in that time. But that's the real way that it does it. It's that endpoints table. And those endpoints are registered with our DERP servers, and then it gets sent out in the net map that goes to the rest of the network.
It is kind of magic, and there was a call that I was on. This is about 18 months ago now, with two of the founding engineers. So people that literally wrote the product, right? Wrote some of the core code of the product, and they set up a couple of containers that were 100% isolated from each other on the same local host. There was no way to send packets between them, and there were containers. The only thing they could do was talk out to the internet. Was the only thing they could do. And to their surprise, on this call in real time, those two containers found a route between each other on that same host without leaving the box, using the same mechanisms that Lee just described. They were very surprised that day. So,
Mhm.
it's it can sometimes even surprise us just how, computers can find routes that perhaps we didn't even think of.
Indeed.
So speaking of custom routes and all that kind of stuff, there's a question in here about Tailscale DERP servers. Is there a way to unblock or perhaps set up my own Tailscale DERP server?
Yes, but it is very much your mileage may vary and you're kind of on your own when you do that.
What is a DERP server and why would someone need one?
Yeah, so a DERP server is the intermediary thing that we use for discovery of like where you are in the world, and is also used for relaying packets in difficult networks. So you we Tailscale runs a fleet of DERP servers around the world. We just added a couple new regions in the last few weeks in order to kind of give our customers the best experience. And they're usually most effective when they are geographically located very close to the two clients that you are wanting to use. Um, the reason we generally don't recommend running your own DERP server is because requires very specific situations. So you need it to be on the public internet. It needs to have an IPv4 and IPv6 IP address attached to it. And it also needs to generally be highly available, which means you need to set up meshing and add a mesh key and a whole bunch of other stuff. We just, like my solutions engineering team does not have the capacity to support everybody who wants to run their own DERP server. So the DERP server code is open source. It's in the Tailscale repo. And you can run it and build it and actually run it as you need to. I run my own DERP servers because I like to understand how they work. But generally, it's not recommended. Once you have got your DERP server up and running, then you need to add it to your tailnet's DERP map. And so there's like a way of actually specifying that you have your own DERP server in the DERP map, which is a part of the ACL. Um, I have offered to help certain organizations to run their own DERP server as like a personal favor, but I just don't have the capacity to get 100 emails from people telling me they want to run their own DERP server. So yeah, it's just generally not it's not something that we generally recommend, basically.
Yeah, here be dragons. It's a
Indeed.
very there are plenty of foot guns available if you let it. So there's a question from Anthony in the Zoom chat asking about different connecting different business entities. Can you give us a bit more info, Anthony, in the Q&A on Zoom, and then we'll get to that one once you've given us a bit more to go on. So there's a question here saying, I'm new to Tailscale. During our testing period, all worked fine, but some of our mapped drives kept dropping, and this didn't happen when they were on a typical SSL VPN. Any ideas?
I'm guessing it's probably Samba. Samba is particularly tricky for most VPNs to work. My guess, and I don't know for sure, but my guess is that you were probably being derped, as we call it. You're probably being relayed through our derp network. And Samba's really, really bad at latency sensitive connections. So if you get your Tailscale configuration to get direct connections, Samba usually works a lot better in those circumstances. But it's not a protocol that was really designed to be used in those kind of high latency situations. Without more information, it's not really super obvious, but that would be my best guess, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. NFS. Have you ever done any NFS over Tailscale?
Plenty, yeah. It works really well. I mean, NFS is pretty good at like latency sensitive situations. So, and especially the NFS v4 is pretty good. Um, but I spent most of my career as an infrastructure engineer, and anytime anybody says, "Let's do this low latency thing over a high latency connection," I'm like, "Cool, this is gonna be fun."
Yeah, let's just
Because
run etcd distributed across 3 continents. Let's just
I
do that.
literally have done
Yeah.
that before, and it is not a fun experience.
Yeah.
But there's only so much we can do about the speed of light, Alex. It is what it is. It is a very
Yeah.
much a fixed constant. So yeah.
Yeah. Transcontinental bandwidth too is not cheap, so it gets prioritized in different ways than stuff that stays on a specific continent. You
Hmm.
can see you can see it pretty clearly if you put a server in a different, different geo. You can see it pretty clearly. Like the ping times are way higher than the speed of light would be for that same distance. Just because I don't know how the ISPs do it. They must like batch up packets somehow and like just
Yeah.
to try and maximize the throughput of the pipes or something. I'm totally making this up, but like
Well,
it
we
seems
have
reasonable somehow.
you should ask one of James. I don't know his last name, so we don't bombard him with questions. But James,
Oh yeah.
James is
Hmm.
the sort of person who knows the answer to those questions.
He would,
I
wouldn't
will
he?
say one of our favorite things when we're on the SE team is somebody saying, "Hey, I'm having a really poor experience with Tailscale right now. Can you explain why?" And we're like, "No, but we'll look into it, and it's actually usually an undersea cable cut that means that they're routing traffic in a different path now." I'm like, "Yeah, we can't do anything about that. It's just the way it is." Like again, there's only so much we can do about the speed of light.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about you and your team at Tailscale and some of the things that people can do to get in touch with you?
Yes, so we are the solutions engineering team. We work closely with our support team. So if you've ever emailed support@tailscale.com, you get our support team. The solutions engineering team is for customers who are looking to adopt or grow their expansion or grow their usage of Tailscale. So if you are already a Tailscale customer and you are thinking about, for example, signing a yearly contract so you don't have to pay as much money and it's more of a yearly commitment, or if you have a specific new use case in which you are going from 10 to 100 users, or if you are thinking about a new use case, it's going to expand your usage of Tailscale or get rid of another VPN that you no longer like using. You can contact us either via the sales contact form. Hopefully, our trusty backend marketing team can help us out with that link. Or if you want to talk directly to a solutions engineer, we have an email address which is sugar echo at tailscale.com. And that's staffed by my team. We are 10 strong now, so we're growing rapidly. Yeah.
Yes, sir, indeed. All right, so a couple of things. There is some follow-up from Anthony in the Zoom chat. Lee, if you take a quick read of that, I'm going to cover off one of the YouTube questions whilst you do that.
Yes. So
Um,
Anthony's asking, do you want me to read it out or while you
well, whilst you figure out the answer, I'm going to just cover off a quick YouTube Apple TV question. So,
sounds great.
I've seen some YouTube videos where you talk about inbound VPNs using an Apple TV as an exit node and subnet router. What is that all about? Well, the general idea is that the Apple TV, in my opinion, is probably the best way to put Tailscale into a remote network that you don't have easy access to. Let's put it that way. So, like a parent's house, maybe, or a friend's house, or somebody that you need an exit node in a different geolocation. Like for me, it's quite handy to have an exit node in the UK for obvious reasons. I live in the States these days. And so I just chuck an Apple TV under the stairs, or figuratively at my parents' house, and it can act as both an exit node and a subnet router. So an exit node lets me appear as if my traffic is exiting from that location where the Apple TV physically is. So I'm far away, but I want to appear as if I'm there. That's what the exit node does. And that's pretty common with typical privacy VPNs, like NordVPN and Surfshark and all those guys. That's typically how a VPN actually works, is it scoops up all your traffic, puts it through a tunnel and spits it out through an exit location. An exit node is just what we call it because you actually own the infrastructure, which is a key difference between the kind of typical privacy VPN providers. The subnet routing piece is a little more complicated. And it can be very, very handy actually for supporting friends and relatives' remote networks. So subnet routing lets you access any device that can't natively or hasn't natively installed Tailscale. So any IP address that's on that remote network, if you enable subnet routing for the subnet range, you can then access as if it was, well, ostensibly on your local LAN. There are some caveats and things to watch out for, and if you have like overlapping subnet ranges, for example, that can be a tricky one. We literally just published a blog post on 4 via 6 on our blog, which I'll put a link to when I finish talking in the chat, which will help you kind of avoid some of those pitfalls of overlapping subnet ranges. But the reason I genuinely really love the Apple TV is that it doesn't use any power to do any of this. It's 1 or 2 watts, less than 1 watt in standby, and you still get all of these this full functionality even when it's in standby mode. So there is no, having to chuck your parents a tenner to cover the electric cost of putting a server under the stairs or something, right? I mean, a half a watt. I mean, nobody's going to notice that. I don't think so. That's why I love the Apple TV. I mean, if you're already in the Apple ecosystem, it's great. And you can, if you put your Apple TV on your Tailnet, you can actually then stream media from a Jellyfin server or whatever else, anywhere else on your Tailnet to boot, and you get a free media player out of it on the other end. So that's why I like the Apple TV so much.
Indeed, I mean, I run one myself, so I definitely agree. Just another quick one from the YouTube chat that I saw while I was reading Anthony's question, which is a little bit more in depth. Our account rep said we can use one TS account for our 2 use cases, these being customer-facing services and employee VPN. We'd like those on 2 separate accounts. Is there a way to do that or advisable? Yes. If you saw at the beginning of when I was doing my show and tell, there is now a way of doing this that is in private alpha. Mike, contact your account rep and ask for an additional tailnet, and we will take care of that for you. So
Very
nice and
good.
easy. Love a low-hanging fruit one. Okay, so Anthony's question. I think I understand it. I think. Anthony is asking via Zoom that he has a third party in my network that wants to extend their devices via Tailscale. I wanted to know if I could manage those devices as my own Tailscale devices and provide them access to their devices while I control their access and what they see. Traditionally, I would have put one of them in behind my firewall's DMZ, but their product needs to be expanded through my enterprise network. There's a few ways to solve this. The easiest way, if they're willing to authenticate their devices to your tailnet, is to just use ACLs to be able to actually segment the network that way. If you want to maintain 2 separate networks, then you can use node sharing to do that. But there are some caveats with node sharing. And if it's machine-based users that you tag, node sharing is not currently available for machine-based users. So you can also authenticate them via SSO and then use ACLs again to actually segment what they can access. I think to kind of give a more in-depth answer, Anthony, you should probably reach out to sales, and we should have a more in-depth conversation with our solution engineering team. So generally, for these kind of more in-depth questions with enterprise networks, our solutions engineering team is on hand to help you. But I think we're probably going to be able to solve this with ACLs and with like segmenting. You could think about ACLs and like a more traditional networking model as like a layer 2 VLAN, right? Like that's the way I like to think of it. You have 2 devices. If they are aware of each other on like a network level, but they can't communicate because there is logical separation between them. So that's where the ACLs come in.
Simple as that, huh?
ACLs everywhere. Yeah.
It's ACLs all the way down until it's grants, of course, and then
Indeed. Indeed.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you for taking that one. That was a little complicated, but I think we got there in the end. So if I've turned on HTTPS certificates in my Telnet, can I use the serve command to use TLS into a service running on a port using the Tailscale address, or do I need to run caddy alongside it or some other reverse proxy?
I think you've probably done more with this. So I'm going to hand it over to you, I think.
Yeah, Tailscale Serve just does the job. I mean, the caveat would be is that it's tricky to proxy more than one port for a node or a service. So you'll quite often see in the YouTube videos that I run one Tailscale sidecar container alongside a specific service. In fact, we've got a video coming out about Karakeep today or tomorrow at some point. I forget when I scheduled it for, where I'm using Tailscale Serve inside the Docker container to be the reverse proxy. Now, if you want to just have one node be the reverse proxy, you can run Caddy, of course. You can absolutely do that. That's a valid pattern to do as well, of course. But if you just want a super simple way to put a service on your ts.net domain with a TLS certificate, there is no easier way than Tailscale Serve. Okay, question coming in is how reliable is Tailscale? Well, I might be a little biased, but I use it all day, every day. In fact, Tailscale uses Tailscale to build Tailscale, and we think it's all right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And like, it's completely the backbone of my connectivity. But I think a good way to answer this is from a customer story. And I can't remember if the customer allows us to talk about their logo. So I'm just going to talk about their use case. So we have at least one customer who deploys devices into rural parts of the USA in the farming industry. And so they actually have Tailscale on this IoT device, and it's connected via a cell tower, and they rely on Tailscale to be able to push software updates and actually manage those devices over a cell phone connection and in a situation where it's actually solar powered. So you can imagine, these devices will turn off on a regular basis or they'll run out of power. Tailscale, it gets some more solar power, it boots, it comes back online, and Tailscale connects. And that's how reliable that they've found it to be, because it will always be able to traverse the network that you're in, and it will always allow you to get that connectivity. So if one of the things you're concerned about is, I'm going to put something in a remote location, I want to know that I can access it, Tailscale is almost certainly your best bet, in my opinion.
I actually use the node indicator the node indicators in the Tailscale dashboard to almost be like an uptime dashboard for myself. And I have lost VMs, I have lost nodes physically on my network that are showing they're online in Tailscale. I'm like, where are you? I could ping you.
We need a Tailscale locate API or something like that. Where are you in the world?
Yeah, because the Tailscale code, as we talked about earlier, is so good at finding ways out to, be discovered. That's kind of the point of the NAT traversal stuff, right? It can find its way to ping home almost always when you think it, even sometimes maybe it shouldn't, but there you go. I see that largely as a positive. And to build on what I said about Tailscale uses Tailscale to build Tailscale, it's true. Like all of our CI systems are spread across different providers, different infrastructures, different architectures even, and they're all connected on the back end together using Tailscale. We use it as part of our deployment process. We use it as part of in fact, all of our internal documentation. We have this little thing called Go links. So if I want to set up a new meeting with Lee, for example, I'd do go/meet and it would create me a new meeting. So like we've got
Great.
little services all over the tailnet internally, the corporate tailnet. And yeah, I know we're horribly biased, but we think it's an all right product.
GoLinks is just so useful for me. Like I use it as a bookmarking tool, right? Like it has all my bookmarks in it, and I just do go/mail and it takes me to my email, right? Like if you aren't running GoLinks in your tailnet, you should really think about it. It's really cool. Somebody just posted in the chat Tailscale AirTags, and now my brain is thinking, oh, what if we actually detected over like Bluetooth connections? That'd be so cool.
Ooh.
Oh, and I think I know how to do that as well. So now I'm interested.
Uh-oh. Show and tell
Uh,
next month will
yeah,
be.
exactly. Another great question here from Sovereign Sean. Will you ever be able to host an internal service to a public domain using an FQDN like image, for example? I think we've answered this before, but it comes up on a regular basis. Do you want to have a take a stab at that, or do you want me to kind of do it
Yeah.
again?
I have a video about this. It's entitled Self-Hosting Services on a Custom Domain. And the idea is you use Caddy to proxy the service, but you use Tailscale behind the scenes to actually connect the Caddy front door to the backend service. And then you can run the service wherever you like, because image, the example here, of course, needs a GPU to be fully effective for like machine learning, for image, for face detection, that kind of thing. It's possible for you to distribute the various microservices that constitute, what a self-hosted app deployment might look like across multiple boxes. But then you still got your single front door, your single ingress point of Caddy, and then it does the proxying over Tailscale behind the scenes and to the user. Like they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and like Tailscale hands out IP addresses. It just hands out IP addresses from the carrier grade NAT space, and so you can always just register that CG NAT in your own that CG NAT address or that IP address in your domain manually. It's relatively easy to do, right? And then Caddy handles all the proxy forwarding and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to use your own domain, that's the easiest way. Yeah.
Good deal. I've got a Kubernetes question for you. Are you in the mood
Oh,
for a,
keep
a
bringing it on.
Kubernetes?
Bring
All
it. It's
right.
been a while, Alex. It's been a while.
Yeah, let me find it. I had it queued up. Here we go. Any support of a gateway API of Kubernetes on Tailscale? How does the ingress of Tailscale work with Kubernetes? And can we use a local DERP to proxy all traffic to my clusters?
Um, that sounds like a three-part question. So part one was, are we planning on supporting the Gateway API? The answer to that is yes. I don't know when that will be complete, but it is on the roadmap and it is something that we will do. For those who aren't
What
familiar
does
with
that
Kubernetes,
mean for those of us that don't know what a gateway API is?
so Kubernetes has a series of APIs that allow you to like do things, so like create a deployment or create a stateful set. And an ingress was the canonical way of getting you into a cluster. And then something called an ingress controller would read those objects, and then it basically an ingress is a really fancy reverse proxy that is API driven, right? And so like if you imagine with Caddy or something like that, you update the host file, and ingress basically manage that via an API. As with all things software, the people who built the Ingress API then went, oh, we missed a whole bunch of stuff. And so then they're building a second API, which is called Gateway API, which is an enhancement on all the things that they don't want to shoehorn into Ingress. So like, they could have called it Ingress V2. There's a whole bunch of reasons that I won't get into why they're calling the gateway, they're calling it Gateway API. So yes, Tailscale is planning to do that. The second part of the question was, how does Tailscale work with Ingress? So the Tailscale Kubernetes operator also operates as an ingress controller and will in future act as a gateway API controller. And what it does is it waits for an object that gets passed to the Kubernetes API of a type called ingress with an ingress class of Tailscale. And when it sees that, it creates a Tailscale device inside your Kubernetes cluster, and then does a whole bunch of magic around Tailscale serve and TCP forwarding to allow you to be able to hit things in that Kubernetes cluster through that ingress object. It's very clever. It's very magic, but you'll see when you actually create a Tailscale ingress with the Kubernetes operator, there's actually a device that shows up in your tailnet called, whatever the name of the ingress is. And then the last part of that question was around DERP servers. Because it's just a regular Tailscale device, you can absolutely use a DERP server to kind of funnel that to access any cluster. I think what the question was around like access to your cluster is, do you want to be able to talk to the API of Tailscale of Kubernetes via Tailscale? Well, the operator has support for that via its auth mode. And so all those things are possible. Yes.
Yes, and all good things come to those who wait. We all know that to be a universal
Yes.
truth as well.
It's really interesting because the Kubernetes operator is our fastest growing way of provisioning Tailscale nodes. And so, the number of feature requests that we have on the operator side is absolutely remarkable. And like the number of things that people want us to build is pretty remarkable. We have some really exciting stuff being announced about the Kubernetes operator in the next few weeks, which I won't talk about, but like there's a big announcement coming with an amazing feature that was recently kind of finished and kind of ready for beta. But the gateway API is on the roadmap, and obviously with the people moving towards it as the kind of canonical way of doing things, we will certainly support that at some point in the future. Yes.
The alpha, beta to GA roadmap for the next 6 months is going to blow your socks off. I think it's going to be pretty cool. There's a huge amount of stuff coming. We've teased it on this stream a few times about stuff like different UIs for different parts of the products that you've all been waiting and asking for a long time. It's coming real soon. We've seen it. We're alpha testing it internally right now, and it looks pretty sweet. So
Yeah, absolutely.
we'll have more to show you and more to share very soon on that topic. I promise you. Okay, so what else should we do now? There's a bunch of questions in this doc, and we've only got about 10 minutes left. Do you want to pick one?
Yeah. I was like reading through them and like ready to declare bankruptcy. There's so many questions, but yeah, let me just go through here on the Zoom side. Nope, nothing here. No,
Well,
you pick one. I
I'm
I
going to
can't
pick a
pick. I
Proxmox question because I do love me some Proxmox.
do it.
Is it recommended or advised against to install Tailscale on a Proxmox node itself? I keep coming across conflicting information on this. Well, I guess it kind of speaks to your philosophy on hypervisors. For me, I tend to treat my Proxmox nodes a little bit like just another server that can happen to run VMs and can happen to run LXCs. Proxmox is really cool because it can do ZFS out of the box, which in the Linux world, the licensing snafus that have plagued ZFS forever, Proxmox just runs a modified Ubuntu kernel and Debian user space. So really, it feels like Debian, but under the covers, like it's actually Ubuntu in a sheep's clothing. It's also got the ability to, migrate containers and VMs between different hosts. So you can almost do live migration if you want to do clustering, that kind of stuff. It's just a really nice thing to use, and it's gained such adoption in the last few years that there are really cool little resources like helperscripts.com where you can install one-click apps effectively, one-click LXCs if you want to, and all that kind of stuff. But coming back to your question, should I install Tailscale on the host or not? I do, because I'd like to be able to access the Proxmox UI through Tailscale. Simple as that. I can use Tailscale Serve to proxy the 8006 port onto my Tailnet if I want to. But equally, it just means that I've got another sort of a different way to get to that front door if I want it. And again, I can put it in a caddy file and have that proxy it or whatever. But Tailscale's so lightweight, it uses, I think, at most like 8 to I think I've seen it at some point use like 24 megabytes of memory, which is a lot, I know, but I think it's so lightweight it doesn't really matter, And you can either run it as a container and pass it through the bits that it actually only ever needs to see, or you can just run it natively on the host as a package and just get on with your life and have fun. Yeah, I love Proxmox.
Question for you, Alex. Are you an Android person or an iPhone person?
Yes,
Do you know if Tailscale app on Android supports being a subnet router?
I think so. Let me check. Hang
I
on.
think it does too, but I don't have any Android devices. This is what you're all here for. It's Alex getting his devices out to check in real time. This is what we're really here for.
Yeah, just to prove I'm not sat in front of a green screen, like that was actually my desk back there.
Yeah. I do love your setup in the background, by the way. I'm very jealous of it. So I'm looking forward to seeing all the stuff that you do up there in that office. But
Yeah, this is a new office space that we've literally just finished building. So subnet routing on Android, subnet routing, yes. Yes, I can add a route to the app on my phone if I want to. So yes, is the answer.
there you go, Lewis. Not only did you get an answer to your question, you saw how unscripted this is in its finest form.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we have 10 minutes left. I have a question for the chat. Um, and hopefully Natasha doesn't murder me for this. I was going to ask her if she was okay to ask about this, but she's out of office. We are having internal discussions about a meeting place for Tailscale people. Lots of people visit the Tailscale subreddit. We really appreciate everyone's incredible commitment to our community on the Tailscale side. We've also recently started doing Tailscale meetups. So if you want to have a Tailscale meetup in your general location, please let us know via our community in Reddit. But we're having discussions about having something like a Discord or a Slack channel. We haven't made a decision yet, to be very, very clear. There's no decisions being made yet. But we are interested if that is somewhere where people would like to congregate and hang out. And the reason I'm asking this is because I'm noticing that the YouTube chat is now primarily people helping each other out, which
Yeah.
is incredible, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's people just answering questions on behalf of us. So if you are interested in being part of a Tailscale Discord or something like that, please let us know in the chat or in the YouTube comments after the video stream has ended. Obviously, and I see somebody mentioning Telegram as well. We're open to ideas around which platform we use, and so suggestions around which platform you would prefer to use as well. I have a strong preference for Discord
Yeah,
personally,
me too.
but everybody has their own preferences.
The downside to Discord is it's yet another proprietary chat app. I mean, whatever happened to IRC in the good old days, huh? You know?
I still hang out in IRC. I don't know about you, but I'm
Yeah.
still in there.
Well,
Yeah.
Freenode kind of imploded, and that was kind of the end of it, really, wasn't it? And then Matrix came along and ate its lunch. So, maybe there's a world where we do a Matrix server instead, and it all becomes sort of open source type
Yeah.
stuff instead of a Discord, because Discord just took some funding. Not to say that's necessarily a bad thing, because Tailscale just took
What are you
funding.
doing, Alex? We addressed this last time.
But we all know that eventually, it can be. I've seen rumors about Discord, and I've just not felt comfortable about their business model for a very long time, which is different to how I feel about Tailscale's business model. Yes, I know, corporate shill, blah blah blah, but we'll see. We'll see. Like
I think for
Discord would be
me,
would be great,
I
I
think
think.
for me that the thing that you need to think about when you build these communities is where is everybody? And like Reddit's so successful because most people have a Reddit account. And I feel like Discord is successful because regardless of your feeling about the platform, most people have a Discord login, right?
What's interesting
Yeah.
on that topic is that for the last 6 years or so, I've done a podcast called Self-Hosted, and we've had a Discord server for pretty much the duration of the show. And many people in the world of self-hosting feel very strongly that the self-hosted podcast should have self-hosted social media, self-hosted chat, all the rest of it. And my argument has always been meet people where they are and further the
Mhm.
mission. Don't worry too much about the minutia of like the perfect solution. So here I am like eating my own dog food, but there you go.
Indeed. We got a question in. So somebody asks, maybe this is a me issue, and I love the self reflection there, but I had some issues with Tailscale overriding the resolve.conf file, and thus DNS went blackout. I had to do some creative routing with DNS mask. Is that an issue? Without knowing what the DNS blackout was, let's talk a little bit about how Tailscale handles DNS. So Tailscale has a built-in DNS server for your tailnet, which we call Magic DNS, which will allow you to resolve the host name of a Tailscale client to its CGNAT IP address. And the way that it does that is it actually, every single Tailscale client hosts a DNS resolver on the actual client, which you can access over the Quad 100 address, which is like a special address that's in the tailnet. If you have the setting, use Tailscale DNS settings, when you start Tailscale up, it will override your DNS settings to use that particular Quad 100 resolver address. You don't have to do that. But if you want to resolve Tailscale's magic DNS names, you will still then need to use something like DNS mask to forward to the Quad 100 address for specific things. I do have a configuration for DNS mask, which is like a split DNS thing where if you look at a specific, or if we do a lookup for a specific tailnet name or a ts.net domain, it will resolve to Quad 100, and then everything else goes out through your standard DNS resolver. But this is entirely configurable. You do not need to have it override, and it's actually a client setting. So the other thing that you can do with DNS is you can actually set global DNS forwarders across the whole tailnet. So for example, if you want to resolve internal addresses in like a corporate environment, you can actually have Tailscale resolve on your behalf inside your network. The thing that's always worth bearing in mind with those is that in order for them to work, you do need to have an ACL or an ACL that actually allows you to hit that Tailscale DNS resolver. So it's always worth making sure that you have all the like network path in there that you need. Hopefully that helps. And I think that probably takes us to time.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty much. But I've run into situations with DNS mask and resolve.conf where the host has been able to route packets to Tailscale just fine. This is specifically a Proxmox thing, I think, although it probably applies to many other container-based situations. And the LXC container inherits the host's resolve.conf file because you didn't override it, whatever. You don't have Tailscale installed inside the LXC yet. And you want to update a package, or you want something like just to get that LXC out of the ground, and suddenly it can't route packets because it's looking at the 100.name server, and it can be a bit of a pain. So just there's lots of gotchas, lots of snafus in that kind of area. So yeah, yeah, just have fun with that one. Now, when is our next webinar? We had this posted in the chat at the top here. I think it's June the 4th. There you go.
That's correct. Yeah.
Three weeks time or so.
Yeah.
1:30 p.m. Eastern.
Indeed, we had a noticeable like drop off in questions today because everyone's so helpful in the chat. People are able to help each other out, which is exactly what I think we were hoping for when we were building this Ask a Tailscale Expert. But this is my favorite thing to do at Tailscale, so looking forward to seeing you on the next one.
Yeah, we still got dozen or so more questions than we had time to get to today. So again, thank you all very much for contributing and being civil and lovely people. We very much appreciate this, and it is a highlight of our month here at Tailscale. So I think that will about do us for today. So thank you very much, and until next time, I've been Alex.
I've been late.
And ta-ta for now.
Catch you later.